Okay, so basically today we're going to talk about a little bit about Unity. I know a couple of the names I recognize. I'm not sure how much any of you know about Unity, but basically it's a game engine similar to that of UDK. So if you've worked with UDK, and those of you who are later on in the program, you might have worked with UDK already. So basically what Unity does is it brings together all of the parts of the game and adds that interactivity to them. What it does not do is create assets. So you would not use Unity to build a character or build a weapon. There are a few assets, though, that you can create within Unity. You could use it to create terrain as frequently created within the game engine, simple terrain-based stuff. You can use it to create particles, and you want to create your lights within Unity. But other than that, most of your assets will be created in another application. So you can create stuff in Maya, you can create stuff in Max. Let me see, this is the link I was trying to bring up for you guys too, but it doesn't, oh, there we go, we're missing one bit. So this is the list of assets that you can import into Unity. And so you'll see that you can use almost anything to create your assets. Blender, Maya, Max, Cinema 4D, those are the big ones. It looks like it even takes Lightwave stuff now if anyone's still using Lightwave. So basically, you don't have to feel like you have to learn a whole new 3D application to use Unity. And most of the importation is just direct. You can just drag and drop right in. It'll take your Maya files. It'll take your Max files. It's not too picky that way. So let's get Unity opened up, and we can talk a little bit about how you would actually work within the interface. So Unity has one, I think, thing about it that is really confusing, and that is that when you open a project in it, it will restart itself every single time. So when you open Unity, it's going to open. If you've never opened it before, it will open a demo project. If you are working on a project in it, it will open the last project that you worked on. So I'm just going to start a new project. Create that. Okay, so that's what it does. That's really, it can be really confusing when you first see it, but it basically, if you open a new project or create a new project, it shuts down the application and restarts, and that's just the way it's architected. Sadly, there's nothing we can do about that. So now I've got a new project. So once you've got a Unity project, the project in Unity is basically going to be your directory structure. It's going to keep track of your assets, your scripts, your models, all of that stuff. But there are basically two different components of any Unity game. So the components of a game are basically game objects and actual components. So if you were to bring a model into Unity, that model would show up in your screen, but what you're seeing, well, actually, let's create something. So we've got a project. I'm going to create a cube. So I've got this cube here, but this cube, so I know I said you shouldn't really create your models in Unity. That said, for prototyping, you can create a few things. So you can create, empty game objects, and then you have a few things: cube, sphere, capsule, cylinder, just basically enough to prototype. So I've created this cube, and it looks like there's this cube model on screen, but this isn't actually a cube. What it is it's a game object that includes a cube. So if you look over here on the right, and this is the inspector panel, that's basically what tells you the details of anything that you're looking at on the left, which is your scene. So right now I've got a cube. On the right, it's telling me that this is actually a game object called cube. It includes a transform, which basically keeps track of its position in space and its scale. It contains a mesh, which is the actual cube model that you see, a collider, which is the shape of the cube, and that's going to tell Unity, whether or not something's colliding with it, and then the renderer, which is going to add your materials and stuff like that. So that's an important distinction. Basically, anything that's added to your scene is going to be a game object that includes the other stuff you put in it. So you can put models in game objects, you can put lights in a game object, you can attach scripts to empty or full game objects. It's really, really flexible that way. Does anybody have any questions so far? Just scroll down and make sure. Okay, good, good. I wasn't sure if there weren't any or if I just wasn't seeing if there were any. Okay, so yeah, game objects, that is the one main component. And then the other thing is to, when we talk about game objects, we also talk about components. So the components, all these things, the transform, the cube, the collider, the renderer, those are the components. And the components make up the game objects, and the game objects make up the scene. So now that that is settled, let's see, we can also create, just to further demonstrate that concept, we can create an empty game object, and you'll see it shows up over here in the hierarchy. So everything that I create in my scene is going to show up here in this hierarchy. This empty game object, I'm just going to call this, I'm going to call it my ground plane object. We're going to talk about a few important rules too once we get this created. So now that I've got this ground plane object, there's obviously no ground plane in it, so I can add, oh, I didn't actually build a mesh for it. Oops. Well, let's just create it with the mesh already. So what I was going to do is take this plane, take a plane and put it in the empty ground plane game object, but I didn't actually build the plane to import. So pretend that I imported a plane into a game object from Maya or some other application. We will just delete this. We will make this ground plane our ground plane object. Okay, so we've got a plane and a cube, and now let's talk a little bit more about the interface that we see in Unity. So this is my scene view. I can move around this the same way that I would move around in Maya, which, let me just get my little cheat sheet here. I just sort of do these things automatically, so to talk about them is a little bit awkward. But basically, I can zoom in. Well, the default sort of Unity is you can zoom using the scroll wheel. You can pan using this little hand tool here, and you can orbit using the right mouse button. Or you can use the Maya control scheme, which is Alt plus left mouse button to orbit. Sorry, I'm trying to look at my notes at the same time. Alt plus right mouse button to zoom, and Alt plus middle mouse button to pan. So if you're using Maya already, you can jump right into Unity and you're not going to notice any difference. You don't have to turn that on or set that up. It's just built in, as well as the basic Unity controls. Another thing that's really cool for navigating around a Unity scene is you can right-click your mouse and use the WASD, the typical sort of game controls that I'm sure you're all familiar with. So if you're using those controls and you're like, you're in a really big scene and you're going really slow and you want to speed up, you can hit Shift as well as the WASD, and you'll notice you're going, this is a little too fast for this tiny scene, but that'll basically just give you a speed boost, adding Shift to that right mouse click. So those are basically the three overarching ways that you can navigate around the scene view. So we've got our scene view, and that's basically where we put everything to build our level. A level in Unity doesn't necessarily mean a game level. It can mean a game level, but it could also mean something like a menu system or a startup screen. You could have, for example, the game I'm working on right now, I've got a level for, I've got like a main startup screen level, and that basically loads a screen where you select whether you want single player, multiplayer, and then you move on to the next screen. I've got another level, or another scene in Unity, which is, so there's a scene for the startup screen, and then there's a scene where you can choose your character, choose the environment that you want to play in, that actual what we think of as the level. And then I have, of course, each of the levels as their own separate scenes. So when I started this new project, Unity gave me a default scene. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save that scene, new project. So it's given me an empty asset folder. Before I save that scene, I'm going to create a folder. So let's just pause for a second and talk about a couple of things in the Unity structure. You never want, you can, so when you create a Unity project, it basically creates this directory for you for the project with an assets folder in it. And while you could find this directory on your operating system and drag and drop stuff into it, in fact, yeah, you could do that, but you don't want to do that, because if you do stuff through your operating system, like if you rename something, for example, Unity is going to lose the connections to it. So if I've got this cube in here, still got my pan on. If I've got this cube in here and I've given it a material, and then I go and I replace that cube with a new cube or rename that cube or something in the folder on my operating system, Unity will get confused and it will lose the material. And so you can easily just remap that material to that cube, but it's going to be something really complicated. So if you have a whole scene and you drop in a bunch of updated assets into that folder on your operating system, and you then have to go in and remap everything in your scene, it can be really time consuming. So it's best just to get in the habit of working within Unity. So to that end, I'm going to go into my assets and I'm going to create a folder called scenes. There are different sort of ways to organize a project, but it's generally accepted as a best practice to keep a separate folder for each of the parts. So, I'm going to have assets. I'm going to create a folder called materials. I'm going to create another folder called prefabs, and we will get to prefabs a little bit more in a minute. But basically, now that I have that, I can save my scene in my scenes folder, and we'll just call it level 1. And all of your scenes are going to be .unity files. Basically, that means you can open them in the Unity editor. You can't, however, just click a .unity file and play it. If you want to play your file, you need to build it. So before we get to building, let's talk about testing. One of the cool things about Unity is the in-game or the in-editor testing is really easy. Basically, I can hit this play button, and there we go. And it's basically showing me that I've got a cube and a plane, and that's basically all I've got at this point because we haven't built anything else. But I can do that right within the editor. I don't have to sort of go outside. I don't have to build it and then open another file. I can basically test everything I do as I build it. So another thing you can do with all of these objects, of course, back to that easy navigation, you can also use the WER keys that you're familiar with for Maya and Max for moving objects around. So let's get something in here so we actually have something to test. Unity, by the way, is free to use. You can download Unity. There's a pro version, but you can actually publish for PC. You can even publish for iOS and Android with the free version. It doesn't necessarily have all the features of the pro version. Particularly, there are performance optimization features in the pro version that are not in the free version, and there are some other customization things. So if you publish a game with the free version, you'll have a Unity startup screen on there. It'll basically say made with Unity. If you get the pro version of, then you can replace that and do your own thing. But for indie developers, it's great because you can publish everything for free. So let's get something we can test here. Another thing that makes Unity so accessible is I can basically go in and actually, let's import an asset. Unity comes with a lot of packages built into it, one of which is the character controller. So basically, I just went to the assets and I imported that character controller. In a second, there you'll see it appear in the standard assets folder, character controllers. And basically, now what I can do is I can pick either first person or third person controller and I can just drop it right into my game. So now I dropped in, I think I've dropped in first person. Oh, we put him, so that's funny. You see how he's sort of halfway through the plane and that he just was falling through space. So you've got to put your first person controller above the ground plane, otherwise he'll just fall into space. So now we should not see him falling into space. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so now just by dropping that controller into my scene, I've got the WASD controls. It's hard to tell with not much in the scene. Let's duplicate that cube. Make a few more. And I'm using Control D. That's another thing that similar between, Maya, Max, all the 3D applications. Just going to Control D those. That'll give us something to look at when we play test. Oh, and they're not showing up because they're all gray. So let's give those cubes a material. You can create materials in Unity. As far as creating materials in Unity, outside of Unity, that's going to come down to your own personal workflow. I'd say for simple materials, something like shiny metal, you can easily create that in Unity. For something more complicated, obviously you're going to have a painted character maps and stuff like that. You probably feel better creating them outside of Unity and then just importing them in. And let me see if I can move the meeting windows in front of me. So I just created a plain material. I'm going to make it red. And now you'll see I've got this new material down here. I'm going to drop that in my materials folder because it's always good to keep your scenes organized. And let's see. Oh, I need to rename that guy. Let's see, rename here. Oops. Well. So if you see, I can drag this material that sadly is called new material. I can drag it over the plane and it'll add it to the plane. Let's create another one for the cubes. Create. I'm going to actually name this one this time. Blue material. There we go. We'll make this guy blue. And again, you can just very easily assign materials. So if you've imported a material, you can do the same thing. If you've imported some beautifully painted material that's the, UV map to your cube and whatever else, you can just drag and drop it. So we've got some cubes that are blue, ground that's red. Hopefully we can see those now when we get into there. That's a little better. And so basically I'm using WASD spacebar for jump. The mouse is what I'm using to look. And all that is just built into the first person controller. So you can see how it would be very, very quick to get something going as far as a level test, or a level prototype. You can drop in basically all your assets, drop in a first person controller, and there you go. You can also do that with UDK, so that is definitely something similar. UDK, Unity both can do a lot of the same things. UDK tends to be optimized for first-person shooter type of games. If you're going to do a first-person shooter, I'd say, either UDK might even be a better choice because it is so optimized for that type of game. But Unity can do that just as well. Unity, I think, has a little bit more flexibility in terms of the game type. So this is game testing mode. Again, I can do this really easily in the editor. Another thing I can do in game testing mode is I can go back to my scene view. I can switch between the two even while I'm testing. So if I'm in game view, I'm going to move my character up onto this box, if I can. I think I'm on the box now. And then if I go to the scene view, there's my character on that box, and I can start to make changes to the game while I'm testing it so I can instantly see them. So say I decided I want these cubes to be blue. I didn't like how they were looking gray. I'm still play testing, and now I can go back and say, oh, okay, that's looking better. One really important thing, though, is if you make a change while you're in play mode, it will not be saved. It's a great way to sort of test things out, but notice if I hit that stop button, those cubes are back to their default material. So It's a great way to test things, especially lighting effects or anything that you're just not, not sure if you're going to do, but it's a really good idea to always check that that play button's not on if you're making changes, because you could work for 3 hours making changes to your scene. If that play button is lit up blue, none of those changes are going to save, so be really careful about that. So we've got that blue material applied now. Let's get rid of this first person guy. I'm just going to delete him out of here. See, and again, all this stuff is showing up in my hierarchy. That's basically anything that's in the scene. If you were to create something in game, like write a script to create bullets, while you're in play mode, those bullets would show up in your hierarchy as well. So that's another great thing about in-editor play testing, is you can, be testing your game, and if your character shoots a bullet, that bullet will show up in this hierarchy view. You have a very clear view at all times of what your objects are, which can be very handy for debugging. The other thing for debugging that's handy is this pause button. I want to stay in game view. I can pause, and then I can also step through. We don't have anything happening frame by frame, but say you had a particle effect that was happening frame by frame, or a script that was triggering an explosion, you can basically pause your gameplay and step through that one frame at a time to see exactly what's going on. That's also really, really a good debugging tool. So let's get back into regular mode so that we can have changes actually happen. Because again, in play mode, we could drop all the player controllers and we wanted to, but they wouldn't actually show up in the game. So let's put a third-person controller and make sure he's on the ground. This one's kind of fun. So this is the other built-in type of player control. And then you notice he's got sort of his built-in animations. You can actually, I think, change the animation that this player's using too. I think by default it's just set up to use one animation at a time, but let's stop our testing, and then you can look over here. So with that character controller selected, you can see all of the components that are in its game object. So it's got a transform. Transform, basically everything's got its transform. That's just keeping track of its position in space. The animation, like I was saying there, you can choose. Oh, I think I opened Maya possibly. So let's not do that. Oh, there we go. So it's got an idle, a walk, a jump pose, and a run. And yeah, okay, so you can change the animations. It's got a character control. Well, it is the character controller, but the character controller is basically a set of scripts that tell this this animated mesh that it is a character. The third-person control scripts telling it how to move, and the third-person camera. If you were to delete this main camera from the scene, this controller would not work. So you don't really want to delete your main camera unless if you're using one of these character controllers, because it does sort of take over that main camera. So let's see. I'll just check my notes and make sure I'm not skipping over anything important. So we went over play testing mode. We went over, let's go over some of the viewport controls that you've got actually. Up here on the left, you'll notice that you've got, this is in textured view in the scene view. I've also got wireframe view. You can do textured wire, render paths, light map. I usually keep it in textured mode. I think that, that works for me. See, it did open my, it thought I wanted to edit those animations because I was getting too clicky over there. I was getting too clicky up in here on the run. But yeah, so I usually work in textured view. You can do whatever, your preference. If you get a really big, complicated scene, you might have to do a wireframe view. The other thing you can do with regard to view is use the F key to focus. That will focus on whatever you're selected on. So you can select that. F, that's going to focus me on there. It's also going to change so that you orbit around that thing. So when I'm orbiting, that cube is now the center. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. The other thing up here is we have RGB alpha modes. I usually, again, keep it in RGB because that's going to give you a good preview of your scene. 2D will give you to the 2D camera view. This is actually something that's new to Unity 4.3, and they've done a really nice job of implementing sort of a default game type for 2D with orthographic cameras, 2D sprite sheets, all kinds of cool stuff. So if you're used to developing 2D games in Flash, you now have the option of using Unity to just as easily, if not more easily, create a 2D game, because it's got sort of, it's, you know, while Flash is something that previously was basically the only way to develop, one of the only ways to develop 2D games, and certainly one of the most widely used, Unity is really sort of making that easy now in terms of being a game engine. So in Flash, you could make websites, you could make presentations, you could do all kinds of stuff. Unity is sort of optimized for making games, so that's a good thing. That said, you can also use Unity to make, you know, an interactive presentation or some sort of an interactive website if you wanted to. I don't know that Unity would be the best way to do that, but it's certainly possible, and people definitely do it. So, yeah, so that's the 2D game type. If I click off of that, it's going to go back to a perspective camera. I've also got over here, for those of you who use these in Macs, I know Macs users tend to like these, you've got all your orthographic views. Even if I go back to, so I'm in orthographic, if I want to get back, I just need to, whoa. There we go. So now that now that I've sort of orbited a little bit, it looks, you know, you'll notice it's different. There's not, the perspective is different. So if I do this, that'll get me between orthographic and perspective views, just clicking on that middle sort of thing there. And either one, you can still orbit around and zoom and pan. You're just going to get a different view. The perspective view is generally what your player will see, especially in a first-person game. So I like to stick with that one. That said, there are games that are developed for the orthographic view, and so if you were developing a game like that, you'd probably want to use the other one, but you get to switch in between as often as you want. So this next button over here on the left top basically turns your lighting on and off. I don't have any lights in this scene. Let's add a couple so we can see more clearly how that's going to work. I am one of those people that I have to look for something every time I need it. So let's create. Material key, of course I'm not seeing the light, it's probably in a different menu. Point light, there we go. So let's do a point light. We're going to use that in a little bit for. Oh, thanks, Steve. If you guys start working, I know Steve does, if you start working in Unity, I spend most of my time actually writing code in Unity. There's always that initial scene set up, but a lot of it is programming. So I tend to set up my system a little differently, and actually I'll show you guys that in a minute. But yeah, so now that we've got one light in here, you know, you can see the lighting view is going to show you what your scene will look like with the lights you've placed. If you turn that off, it's basically going to give you that flat lighting viewport that you won't see in your game. And so we play test this. Looks a little bit, there we go, there's our light over there. And then of course you've got here, you can turn your sound on and off. We don't have any sound in this little game we've created. You can also turn effects on and off. Interestingly enough, the animated materials are in here. Animated materials are not, if you're developing a mobile game, you should not be using animated materials, just as an aside. So Unity is cross-platform. It is built with the idea in mind of sort of build once, publish everywhere. That said, there are a couple considerations. You know, the animated materials is one of them. You cannot use animated materials on iPhones. iOS won't accept them. The other thing to keep in mind is if you're wanting to make a mobile game, you can develop in Unity for Android and for iOS, but to publish, you have to publish them a little differently. I can publish this for Android just by going to my build settings. I can pick Android, hit build or build and run, and that's going to work great. If I want to do the same for iOS, though, let's just see if it's going to give me an error. So it's error. I hope I don't crash it. Because basically, if you want to build to for iOS, you need to build a project on a Mac. So I'm on a PC. That's why it's going to give me an error. Oh, the meeting's telling me my audio is degrading. Or is it degrading for you guys? Just got a little pop-up that said you may be experiencing audio quality problems. Anyway, yeah, so that, I didn't even see if that error popped up. I think that was the thing. It said you might be experiencing degrading audio. Please close an application. And since all I have is open as Unity, but basically my point is, I working on a PC cannot build this for iOS. What I can do though is I can copy these files over to a Mac, open them into Unity on a Mac, and there's like sort of, whereas I can just build straight to Android, for iOS you have to build and to Xcode, and then you have to open Xcode and build from Xcode to the phone. So it's 2 steps, but it's still fairly cross-platform. You can still develop everything once and publish everywhere. It's just a few more steps. That's all. So yeah. I'm just going to check my notes again, make sure I haven't skipped over anything. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm trying to decide whether, let's talk about prefabs first before we go on. I have a short example. I don't want to scare you guys by saying that you'll spend most of your time programming in Unity. I just spend most of my time programming in Unity, but that said, you don't have to. They have some things that make it accessible and easy to learn scripting. So right now, I'm looking at all these cubes. I've got all these different cubes over here. If I want to change all of these cubes, I'm going to have to change every single one. A better way to go about doing that is to create a prefab. And so earlier I created this prefab folder. If I drag this cube into it, I don't know how well you can see the color on my screen, but basically the cube has sort of, in the list, has changed color from black to sort of a blue color. What that means is that it's now a prefab. Prefabs are kind of like, if you're familiar with Flash, I think of a prefab as sort of like a movie clip. So basically I've created this cube here, and if I delete all of these cubes and then put a bunch of prefab cubes, then if I make a change just to the prefab, it should be reflected in all of those cubes. So let's see if we can. There, so I'm changing all of those cubes by changing that prefab. That said, I believe I can still individually adjust. So basically the prefab is like the movie clip, and each of these are sort of instances of that movie clip. And I think it's a good idea to make most things in your scene prefabs, even if you're not going to duplicate them a bunch of times, just because it's going to let you make changes more flexibly by changing the prefab rather than the object itself. So if I have, this cube prefab and I add some scripts to it, and then I take it out of the scene, if I've made, added those scripts to the prefab itself, they'll still be there. I can drop it into another scene. I can drop it back into this scene. Scripts might be something like, if a player runs into me, explode. So that's, just one way that would be helpful. I can put that, if a player runs into me, explode script on the cube in this level. I can then use that prefab in another level of the game as well, without having to rewrite that script or reattach that script to each instance of it. So prefabs, it's one thing I skipped. Just double checking it's make sure I didn't skip anything important, because it's a little bit odd to sort of think about some of the things, you know, you've been using software for a long time and you take things for granted, and when you try to explain it to somebody who doesn't have as much experience using it, it's easy to sort of forget things, and that's what I don't want to do, is forget something important. Leave out something important, and then you'll go to build something in Unity and think, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, so programming. We've got our example scene, got our little third-person guy. I'm going to delete him and put a first-person guy back in there. And we're going to talk a little bit about scripting. And we will have, actually, I'm going to do also in March another Unity presentation, March 12th. So I think that's about 2 weeks from now. And in that presentation, we'll do a lot more scripting. It'll be, well, basically, my plan is to show you how to make a player shoot something, probably spitball, so I don't have to build a gun. So have a player shoot something and have that something be able to hit something and explode it into giblets. And we'll do all that with C#, and that'll be really fun. But let's not jump too far ahead of ourselves. So let's see, I've got my first-person controller back in here. You can see my light over there. I'm going to show you guys basically how to use a trigger script, and I know some of you already know this stuff, but basically if you don't know how to program, that's okay. You can still start to use Unity, and you can learn to program through using Unity. Unity makes it quite accessible to do that. You can use 3 different programming languages in Unity. You can use C#, which is my preference. You can use JavaScript. It's not true JavaScript. Some people refer to it as Unity script. It is JavaScript syntax. However, you couldn't, if you're using JavaScript in Unity, you couldn't drop in a web mobile library, say jQuery or Bootstrap or something like that, because that stuff is not going to work in Unity. So it is JavaScript, but it's not true JavaScript as in the web version. So hopefully that makes sense. And you can also use a language called Boo, which is it's a syntax similar to Python. To be honest, I don't use it. I'm not a Python fan, but it's an object-oriented language. It's similar to Python, and you can use that in lieu of JavaScript or C# if you prefer it. Let's see. So when you are building, well, actually, I don't want to skip ahead to the script editor yet. Oh, one other thing I totally skipped over, a couple of important key codes. I can use spacebar the same way that you would in Maya or Max to maximize a window. I can also use Control-P to go back and forth between playtesting mode and regular mode. So similar to in some, if you use Sublime Text 2, it's Control-B. I think if you use Flash, I think it's Control-M. So you still have that sort of key code. So, sorry, I've got my notes out of order. I have this little step-by-step thing that I was going to do to go over the trigger scripts. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is talk about trigger scripts, and I'm just going to have to wing it because apparently I take very poor notes when I was preparing this presentation. I did this whole process, and I thought I wrote it down, but apparently I didn't. So I've got this box here. It's a little bit bigger than the other boxes. In fact, let's give it a different material so we know which one it is. We will make this box a really gross pink. And I'm going to put that material in the materials folder. Or not. I thought I just put it in the materials folder. Apparently I did not. Wow, that's never happened. I've never been able to do that before. It looks like I just made a material disappear. So we'll make it again, and we'll make it in the materials folder this time. We're going to call this pink. Go back and find that really ugly pink. And I'm going to make this cube pink. Wow, that's okay. Sorry, I can't take the ugly pink. It's too much against the red. So we'll make it yellow. So this yellow cube is going to become a light switch of sorts. Let's just drop it down into the ground. So now it's kind of like a shallow box that our character is going to be able to step on. And so right now it's not really doing anything. Oh, there's my yellow cube. I can walk over to it. I can, jump up on it, I can touch it, walk over it, whatever, and nothing's happening. What we're going to do is we are going to make this, let's see, we'll make it turn this light on and off. Let's put this light near it so it's sort of spotlighting on there. And let's take this light and let's make it a spot. Rotate. Again, I'm using that WER, that same shortcuts that you're used to from your favorite 3D application. Just going to position that right over the sky. And let's pump that intensity up so it's really bright. Okay, so we've got our spotlight, and now we can see that over there. Let's see, what we're going to do is add a trigger script to this. So this is how you can sort of program in Unity without programming. So I am going to go up here. I think I have to import the scripts package. Yeah, because I'm going to use the sort of default Unity scripts. So anything that you import into Unity is going to show up in, if it's a standard asset, it'll show up in the standard assets folder. You can also get stuff from the asset store, and we'll look at that in a minute, but if you do that, it'll show up in its own folder for that, whoever makes the company that made the asset or the person who made the asset, whatever they decided to name their folder. Okay, so general scripts. I've got my box selected, and I'm going to use this activate trigger script. And basically, all I'm going to do is find the script with the box selected. I'm going to drag that script over here, and basically now I've added that script as a component to this box. So this box has a trigger, and I make sure to go up here on the collider because the box has a collider. Basically, anytime anything collides with it, if I have this is trigger checked, it's going to know, oh, I've got a trigger script. I'm gonna take a look at that now. So what I want to do with this trigger is activate something. I want to activate this spotlight. So I'm going to grab over here, still called the point light, but that's okay. I'm just going to drag it from my hierarchy window on the left. I'm going to drag it over to the target of the script, basically assign it. So that's my target. So we can't activate a light that's already activated. So let's again go to this light and deactivate it. So now that light is off, but theoretically, when I step on this or collide with this box, that trigger script is going to be activated to activate my light. Let's see. Let's just see if it works. I think I got everything set up there. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. It worked. Yay. So that's basically, you've basically just done scripting without writing any code. Kind of. We actually have written code. We just can't see it. So I'm going to go into, I'm just going to double click this activate trigger. And you'll see this mono-develop is opening. So mono-develop is sort of the coding interface that comes with Unity. If you download Unity and install it, you automatically have mono-develop installed. And when I'm working in Unity, most of the time I'm working like this. I've got my, scene window or game window over here. I usually put the console here. That's another thing we should talk about really quick. You can change these layouts. Wide is pretty close to what I use. I just take that console window as well and drag it up here. Why isn't it dragging up there? Huh, that's odd. I wonder if the meeting software is interfering. It doesn't look like it right now, but you can, the same way you can rearrange windows in Flash or in Maya or in Max, you can do the same with Unity. So I usually take that console window and I dock it next to the inspector. Sometimes I dock it next to the project window. But you can arrange the interface any way you like. You've also got these choices here. The 4-split, that's a good one for seeing that space bar shortcut in action, although that's not working at the moment. Yeah, so you've got other options too, 2x3, 4, default, tall, wide. I like wide. I'm from a programming background, so I tend to stick with that. So now I've got Unity side by side with this. What the script is in here is basically what we just sort of wrote. We didn't write it because the script was already there, but what we did do is assign a target to it. So I'm not going to, go through scripting. This isn't the Unity programming presentation, but basically you can see that this script does all of the stuff that it takes to activate that trigger, and that trigger object is public object target right here. So when you're writing scripts, anything that you make a public object, you can see over here. So it's kind of like, it's a component architecture basically. So I can write this script and attach it to this cube, and anything that I make public in that script, which is target, is going to show up here as something that I can drag and drop another object to in Unity. So I could make that target, it could be another cube, it could be another, it could be another player, an enemy, a great use of that sort of method is, one of my favorite scripts to use and to write and tweak for each project is sort of the gibletized script. You can basically create a script that's called, giblets on collision, and you can create a public array, of objects, and then you can make whatever you want. It could be little drops of blood models, or it could be, if you have a robot that's exploding, you could make robot parts, and then you can drag those parts into, in this script it's the target, but if I had created, actually let's just go ahead and do that. If I make a public game object array, let's see, and then save that, theoretically that should show up over here. I don't know if I'm really allowed to edit the Unity default scripts or if it's a good idea to do that. But, oh, we didn't give it a name. Public game object giblets. So we don't really need giblets for this, but if we did, we would do it that way. Let's see. There, okay, so now that I've created that array of giblets, I can see in my Unity window the giblets has shown up, and it's asking me what size I want it. So if I want 5 different giblets, it's going to let me drag something to each of those. So say I want this blue, cube to be a giblet. I can do that. I can make a different cube the giblet. I could make a light the giblet. I could basically drag anything into any of these slots and then use the script to sort of control what they're doing. So I could go into the script and say, take each of these giblets, instantiate them, and make them, go in a random direction at this force, and that's going to give you that sort of great explosion of giblets that everybody loves in Unity. So hopefully I've made scripting a little bit more attractive than you might have thought, because that's really where all the fun stuff happens. So yeah, that's our basic stuff. I don't think I have anything else in my notes to go over. Let me just, again, I'll double check, but what kind of questions? Yeah, I don't see, it is. The making things blow up. That's why you need to learn to program. And programming really is fun. It is really not as scary as it seems. So yeah, but what do you guys have any questions about anything that I've gone over? Again, I'm just going to go through. I've got 4 pages of notes here. I haven't actually double-checked them all. I don't think we missed anything really important. I have a couple resources to share. Is there a meeting schedule? Wait, let me scroll up a little bit. Oh, Steve, yay, because you're like a Unity expert already. Joe, meeting schedule. So as far as these presentations, I'm giving another one on March 12th, which is 2 weeks from now, Wednesday, same time. And I think that, let's see, I think it should be in your campus calendar, in the Campus Common events calendar. Should be in there because it'll have a different GoToMeeting link than this one. But you should be able to get to it from there. I know I just submitted all of the March stuff today, so I would assume if it's not already listed on there, it will be listed in the next day or two. Yeah, Joe, we're working on that because I was just talking to my boss this morning about that, about how we can better get the word out about these presentations. What are the layouts and layers and buttons? Oh, so the layout up here basically will change the layout of your game window. Let's maximize Unity. So that's basically, you know, do you want a 4-view? Do you want wide layout, which is what I use? There's a tall. Okay, so that puts your scenes on the left, and they're basically the default layout. So the same way that you have your default layouts in whichever 3D application you use. But you can also customize these. Like I said, let's see if it'll work this time. I usually like to have the console window docked up here. For some reason, docking is not working, and I think it's actually just the meeting recording interfering with that. But usually you can, drag that up there, and this will highlight blue, and you can dock it. You could do that with any of the other windows. Layers. I honestly don't use the layers menu, but there we go. You can turn stuff on and off. Oh, I just hit nothing. Let's go back to everything. So yeah, you can turn stuff on, off. You can do just effects. You could do, water is sort of one of those things that you can use the Unity default assets. Actually, let's talk about those a little bit, because make sure I didn't. Yeah, exactly what Steve said. You can organize things that way. Let's talk about some of the default assets, and then I'll give you guys some resources too. We've just got a few minutes, but assets, import package. So Unity comes with all of these sort of things built into it that are for your use. So Skybox is basically going to create a sky around your world, so that you don't have to, you're not looking at this sort of blank gray horizon. Oh, that's taking a long time. I should have picked a shorter one. But you can, basic meshes, like you can import the Unity default materials. You can import the default sort of trees and stuff like that. So there are a lot of assets for you to use that you can just use obviously you don't want to make a game and release a game that's using all default assets, but as a starting point, or for building prototypes, or for just getting your, getting your feet wet and learning Unity, it's a great way to go. So, wow, that's taking forever. But let's while that's slowly importing, let's talk about a couple of resources that I really like for Unity. So, of course, the Unity website has a whole section called Unity Learn. They've got some tutorials in here, which are great, especially the 2D ones for the new 2D features. Unity, again, when you download it, it will have it should have two, although I'm not sure if now it defaults with one. It should have two sort of tutorial games with it, and when you open Unity for the first time, your default project should be one of those, the 2D one, which is this, it's this little guy jumping around in this little world shooting stuff, and then this robots one, that's the 3D demo. So that's a great way to learn, is just open those demo projects and take a look around and see how everything is set up. They've got tutorial videos on this page. Another great thing that's easy to overlook is this live training archive. So fairly often Unity will do a live training, and if you can't make the live training, which or if you just, they just archive them all here, which is really great. I can't see, what was the last one I went to here? Not sure, but they're great tutorials like this. Let's make a game infinite runner. It basically shows you how to make an infinite runner game in, an hour or two, or however long the session is. The other one I like to use, and I'm going to have to Google it, is this is what will really get you into scripting. Yeah, that's true, Steve. You can ask questions in those live trainings, and they're pretty good about answering them. So Pushy Pixels, oh, I wanted to get to the YouTube channel. So these guys have a YouTube channel that's basically awesome. It's really, really awesome. It's called Cooking with Unity. And actually, let's go to the radio. So basically, you can see all these episodes here. Tower Defense, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. These guys do a session every week. I don't even know what day of the week it is. I think it's on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or something. But basically, they work in Unity for an hour, and then they record all of their sessions, which you can access anytime on their YouTube channel. So Tower Defense episodes, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 12. Basically, if you were to follow all of those episodes and follow along with them, you could build a tower defense game. I think they have an infinite runner game and something like 2 or 3 sessions. They've got the 3-minute game, which is great. It's really definitely check out the Pushy Pixels Cooking with Unity channel and check out the 3-minute game because they aren't doing these using, it's not a 3-minute game by dropping in the default player controller. It's a 3-minute game that's scripted. And so if you want to get into Unity scripting, this is an excellent way to do so. You can see they've got asteroids, dual stick shooter, auto-scrolling platform. Yeah, that's the infinite runner one, the auto-scrolling platformer in 3 episodes. So you can really learn a ton from these guys, and they're really funny. So that's the other resource I have. Let me see if I can find the more direct link. Because it's not normally. There we go. So this is their actual sort of.
Hello, everyone. We're from.
Yeah, sorry about that. This is their actual sort of page. Then it's a little bit better organized if you actually go to it. So sadly, it's not YouTube pushy pixels, but I can paste that into there so you have that link. And then, of course, the Unity live training stuff is all on the unity3d.com. And then the other resource that's really good that you have access to through the Art Institute is the Digital Tutors tutorial series. Let me see if I can pull some of those up to show you how much there is there. So you should have free access to digital tutors through the Art Institute. The only thing is, to sign up for it, you have to go to the link through the Art Institute online library. If you try to sign up even using your Art Institute email, if you don't go to the link through the library, it won't give you the free access. But make sure you've got your Art Institute email set up, go into the library. I think it's in the industry info section. There's a digital tutors link, and if you go to the digital tutor site from that link, you can basically set up a free account, and I really highly recommend this resource. For those of you that have been in my classes, I use it all the time. So basically, they've got a huge amount of Unity stuff. Basically, everything in the pipeline, creating, 2D games, creating 3D games, optimizing things for Unity games. They've got, video series that are hours and hours and hours long that you can really just, I mean, I'm still scrolling. This is just so much information. So the beginner's guide to Unity, I actually wouldn't recommend it that much. It's really long for what it is, but and it's a little bit older. But I mean, as far as the game development pipelines, highly recommend that resource. So definitely sign up for that if you haven't already. So those are the resources I had to share. I don't really have anything else to present. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I can stay a few minutes extra. Awesome. I'm good. If you're sold on scripting, then I've succeeded. Awesome. I love it. My husband is learning to program. He's really excited about it. Oh, code.org. You know, there are a lot of great free programming resources out there. Udacity's got some great mobile. I recently did one of their. They had a mobile web class with some Google developers that was really good. Oh gosh, what's the other one? My husband is always using this one site for learning to program, and I just can't remember the name of it right now. It's not code.org, but it's similar to that. But a lot of good stuff out there for learning to program, stuff that I wish was there when I was learning to program, because when I was learning. Yeah, Joe, it is Code Academy. Thank you. Code Academy, and then there was another one, something about the tree something. Anyway, yeah. Gosh, when I was learning to program, none of that stuff was out there, and it was just books, like paper books that you had to look at the book and then type the code in and compile on the console, and it's just, it's so much better now. Life is so much better now. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming, and this should be available on the Art Institute YouTube page probably in the next, I would give it a day or two. I'm not sure exactly how to do that. But yeah. Yeah, Joe, thanks for coming, and let me know if you guys have any questions. You can always email me at swade@aii.edu, and hopefully I will see you in 2 weeks. Fantastic. I will talk to you soon. Yes, Joe, March 12th, same time of day, so 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Is that right? Yeah. Yes, March 12th. Awesome. Fantastic. I will talk to you all then, hopefully.